Are reporters actually watching the powerful or just partying with them? The Newsy scandal revealed that too many journalists care more about being chummy with sources than doing their actual jobs. Marissa Kabus joins us to explain how this specific brand of journalism breeds deep mistrust of the entire industry.
This larger issue of journalists sitting on information, we talked about this moral rot, this kind of interplay with sources and journalists, but there's also been, especially during the Trump years, quite a few prominent journalists who have sat on information to curry favor or at least not fall out of favor with the Trump White House.
Yeah, it's a huge problem. It's not a new one by any means. It's something that's been going on for years. And I think we've only just become more aware of it, maybe in the Trump years. There was, I think, Woodward published a book a few years ago, and everyone just sort of casually like, yeah, I found this out 2 years ago, but I didn't tell anyone about it until now because I'm selling a book now. And I guess maybe that was accepted at one point in time or was just considered part of the game. But now, given the high stakes of everything that we learn, it seems really irresponsible and selfish to withhold any information. So it just seems like maybe a practice that is changing, that maybe is going to be frowned upon now in a way that it didn't used to be. And so I guess maybe that's why people thought they were allowed to. Like they thought it was okay to just sit on it. But ultimately, it does create a crisis of trust in journalism and in other journalists because you never know if you're getting the full story. Last year, the big story that Olivia Nuzzi published was about Joe Biden's declining mental acuity. And in light of the scandal and her closeness to RFK Jr. and her connections in Trump world, people were re-examining, how accurate was that story? Or was it biased in some way? And it's like, at the end of the day, yes, the story was true, basically, that Joe Biden's mental acuity wasn't great at the time.
Yeah.
But she was coming at it from such a specific point of view, and the reader had no idea about that point of view. Like we were not privy to her connections to the story. And so that undermines the trust that you could have in her work. And I honestly think would warrant an investigation into other pieces that she's written in the past about what possible entanglements she might have had.
Do you remember when former Politico reporter Jake Sherman, who's now, I think it's Punchbowl News, he co-founded. He texted Mark Meadows on January 6th from the Capitol saying, help us, we're helpless. And Mark Meadows never replied. And he sat on that for a year. I think it came out only in the January 6th commission.
Yeah. So Jake and I went to the same college.
Oh, so did I. He was in my journalism classes.
Wait, you're a GW?
I am, yes.
Same.
Yeah.
Wait, did you guys go to school at the same time?
We must have. He was a year ahead of me.
Okay, yeah. And I'm his year.
Oh, yeah. So
He's blackberrying under the table for the Hatchet.
Oh my God, that's so funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wrote for the Hatchet when he was editor-in-chief there. So it feels very much like a two roads diverged situation.
Sure does.
I mean, he practices an entirely different brand of journalism that I am not really familiar with. The sort of Politico playbookification of politics and political journalism. And his outlet started this thing called Eye Out Day, or they interview politicians as they're about to leave town. I guess that's like a phrase that people use.
Yeah, because most of them fly out on Thursdays after the last votes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the first episode was House Speaker Mike Johnson. Jake and that set of people, they're so, I don't know the better ways, in bed, in bed is taking a new meaning now with this scandal, but they're friends. I mean, I feel like they're like legitimately, maybe not friends, but friendly. They're
with people who left them to die on January 6th.
Right.
I will never get over that, ever.
Well, we did a January 6th episode, I think last year, right around the time we did the Newsy episode last time with Meredith Shiner.
Yeah, the great Meredith Shiner, sorry. No, but we talked about all of this. What is the press corps' responsibility and the complete abdication of responsibility by both Democrats and Republicans.
Yeah, there was very little protection in it. It was clear that when push came to shove, and they're not looking out for the journalists who are in there every day trying to cover every little twist and turn of their drama that's playing out on Capitol Hill. Yeah, it's so you might think that these people are your friends, but they're not your friends.
Yeah. You know, Kate and I both used to be congressional reporters, so we know how hard the job is, but there is a whole different level of access journalism that they are practicing.
Yeah, and it's like, how do you get that access? You know, that is cultivated over a long time, and that is as a result of signaling a willingness to, I think, bend certain rules, cut certain corners, and look the other way when it's convenient for the people that you're covering or beneficial to you professionally.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like I've had access threatened as a reporter before.
Yeah.
When I was a congressional reporter, like I worked for Rewire, and we were all about like pushing people, especially Republicans, on abortion rights. And eventually, people just stopped taking my calls. Like, and that followed me when I went to Fox, where I was no longer covering that, and I was just a general politics reporter. Like those same people would also not take my phone call, and it goes both ways too. Like also, when I was at Fox, I covered the 2020 Democratic primary, and I used to brag that every single one of the Democratic campaigns called to complain about my work at least once.
What was the best complaint?
I had Biden and Sanders when they were a 2-person race, like towards the end of it, both call me within 10 minutes of each other about the same article, saying you are unfair to my person and you are too conciliatory to the other person. And I'm like, okay, first of all, you both are saying the same thing. Because I pointed out like Biden, you know, has a record of voting against like anti-gay stuff. Like Bernie Sanders back in the day voted for some anti-gay stuff. And they're like, well, you know, Bernie Sanders was the first guy to do blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, yeah, I noted that in the piece, but he also did those other things. Like, it's my job to inform. And they were like, well, you know, we don't really want to talk to you anymore. Why don't you tell your editor to send a different reporter next time? And I'm like, sure. Okay. And now I'm an opinion reporter, and I wonder how that happened.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's like, how do you maintain access to information? Access journalism, we're talking about a kind of collegial relationship that breeds unethical situations. But at the same time, yeah, your job as a reporter is to get information. So skirting that line is really difficult. And so I think that that's what we're seeing kind of explode with the whole Newsy Lisa thing, is that they had this access and were getting, or at least she was getting this really sensitive information. She was really close to the story and she was being rewarded for it at a certain point. But then it turns out she was doing it in a completely unethical way. And so it's like, we want that information, but at what cost?
Right. And also, like, she eventually was doing favors for somebody she became infatuated with, which is why the fucking ethical rules exist in the first place, not to get like personally involved with your sources or the subjects that you're writing about.
Yeah. She didn't seem to have a problem with that. And I don't know. I think it was like she sold the premise of her book as if she had this, it was a specific situation where she had this lapse because she was so in love and she was so overcome by her feelings. And then I think what the Lizzo posts are revealing is that it's more of a pattern of behavior and that it wasn't just special to RFK Jr. and it undermines the entire premise of her book or the way she's selling it as if it was just like one indiscretion instead of a career of not playing by the rules.